Hello and welcome to another performance of And Did Those Feet, the podcast which likes to explore the world of English football after the war. And I'm joined as ever by Karl Ramsey. Hello, Karl.
Hello, Peter.
Karl, we're going to talk about the gentleman who's over your left-hand shoulder and the 11 gentlemen that are over mine, namely Ipswich Town, and how they managed to accelerate their promotion from the third division south in 1955 to the League Championship in 1962 under the guidance of Alf Ramsey. Ipswich was a backwater football town
Mm.
in 1955. They'd joined the league in 38. They'd got out of the third division south once when they got promoted to the second division. They went down straight away in one season. That's the state of the club when Ramsey joined. Ramsey had come from Tottenham. Tell us a bit more about Ramsey's playing career. His playing career is over here now, isn't it? Because they'd offered
Yeah.
him player manager and he'd said he didn't want to do that.
Yeah, so Ramsey, of course, had an excellent playing career. Got into the England team while he was at Southampton, moved to Tottenham, where he was part of a side that won promotion and then won the First Division Championship at the first attempt in the famous push and run team. So he had an excellent club career, and he was also a regular for England for quite some period of time. His position was right back, but perhaps that's slightly misleading in the sense that he was a very good passer of the ball, quite a creative player, more integral to the tactics, certainly the Tottenham side, than you might expect from a right back. Um, but by the mid 50s, his career at Spurs was over. And yeah, he took the opportunity to move to what you rightly describe as a real footballing backwater in Ipswich.
I'm afraid they were. I mean, they were really footballing non-entities, and that must have been a disappointment for Ramsey because he'd hoped for a job on the staff at Spurs, who, as you say,
Yes.
had won the league in 51. And but instead, I mean, there was one job going, but it didn't go to him. It went to his old rival, Bill Nicholson. Actually, the relationship between Bill Nicholson and Alf Ramsey is something that really is
Yeah.
does require a further exploration because that's very interesting. But at this stage, then, when Ramsey takes the job in 55 of managing Ipswich in the third tier. Nicholson is on the coaching staff at Spurs. He's going to become manager. He's going to win the double. He's got a tremendous career ahead of him. Ramsey is marooned in the third division, and he's got a ground which is really crumbling, and a club with gates of sort of up to 10,000, but certainly nothing like what he left behind at Spurs. But
Mm.
he takes them over and he instantly has a sort of galvanizing effect and gets them up through the divisions. They get into the second division in 56. And I think it takes two seasons actually.
It
Uh,
does, it does, yeah. So they have a good crack at getting promotion in the first
and they
season.
come
In his
third,
first
don't they, or
season,
something? They do
doesn't
pretty
quite
well.
manage it. Yeah, they score a lot of goals, don't quite manage it. Second season, they have a really poor start,
That's right.
um, but he turns things round.
And so by the time they get into the second division, then he has several seasons in the second division, quite a strong second division, as we talked about before, with a lot of clubs in there that will go on to bigger things, bigger and better things. Teams like Liverpool, for example, are part of the mix in at the top of the second division. And Ramsey gets Ipswich up there. And then in 60-61, he wins the second division and gets Ipswich up into the first division. And most people think they're going to come back down again. I mean, most people think that the purpose of the season is to fight for their lives to stay in the first division, but Ramsey doesn't have any ideas like that. And instead, he gets them up to the top, towards the top of the first division, and then he keeps them there. And eventually, they climb the summit really just as the music stops at the end of the season. So
Hmm.
we're going to talk today about how and why Ipswich won the league from such an unpromising position. And bear in mind one remarkable fact. There are five players in that Ipswich team behind me who won, well, league titles in the third division south, the second division, and the first division. And there's only
Hmm.
one other player in the history of the game, as far as I know, who's achieved that. Do you happen to know who that is? I think I'm right
Oh,
in saying only one other
one.
player. Actually, while you're just thinking about it, Ellsworthy, the punchy midfield player, who's in the back row in the picture that I've got. a Wales player, but not a Welsh player, but not a Wales player.
Yeah.
He's actually seen four promotion or four championships. He's done the League Division South twice because he went up with Ipswich the first time round. Any ideas who's the only other player that I think I'm right in saying has got three championships, third, second, and first?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question, but no, I don't know.
Well, you can give me,
I'm going
you
to
can
kick
ask
myself,
me.
aren't I?
Yeah, well, no,
Hmm?
I don't think. Well, you might do. Actually, curiously enough, if I give you a clue, I think he's a Wales international as well, a Wales international midfielder. I say as well, Ellsworthy wasn't an international. He blooming well should
No.
have been, but he wasn't. And in fact, he is the answer to a question I'm going to give you later in the piece. I've just punched
Okay.
you. So right, I think the answer to my question is Andy King of Leicester, who I think was in the
Oh,
Leicester
yes.
midfield through the three promotions.
Yes, I
Um,
think you're
the
right.
third, what
Yes.
would that be? The second division, the first, whatever they're called these days.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
the
League One,
Championship and the
Championship,
Premiership.
and Premier League, probably. Yeah.
But it's an incredibly rare feat. And what that I think that illustrates is that Ramsey took the raw material that he was presented with, and that's absolutely right. He did exactly that. When he went to Ipswich, he could have sacked the staff and brought in his own staff, but he didn't do that. He did what Shankly did and kept the
Mm.
staff who were there and worked with the players who were there. And actually, the 11 behind me who won the first division title, and I think that's fair enough to say that. We'll come to that, why I can say these are the 11 who won the title in a moment. But these 11 that won the title behind me, five of them are in that mix. So five of these guys were in the Ipswich team when Ramsey appeared and when Ramsey came on the scene. And they stayed with him and he stuck with them. And
Mm.
of course, in many ways, some of their roles were changed. And when we talk about why Ipswich won the league, one of the reasons was because Ramsey made the absolute best of the raw material that he had, and
Absolutely.
really worked out how he could get the best. So if we look at the chap who looks a little bit old, who's kneeling down at the front on the left hand side, we know that's Sticks Ledbetter.
Yeah.
Everyone who says he looks old, I mean, I'm not breaking any secrets here.
No,
Everyone
no,
says it's out there.
yeah, I think the evidence is before our eyes.
Afraid it is. He looks as if he's a sort of pensioner. Maybe he's the kind of mascot from the old people's home, but no, he's not. He is a first class player with Ramsey. But what Ramsey does with Ledbetter is he converts him into a kind of wing half, I suppose we could say, but stroke winger. A very strange position. So he's not a forward who needs necessarily to get down to the byline to make his point. He's playing the ball. So Ramsey finds a way through his tactics and through using the players intelligently. Of Compton is another Compton in the back row, who's a wing half when he arrives at Ipswich. Ramsey converts to a fullback. He plays something like 40 games in the Championship winning title. He's previously been a reserve wing half at another club, I think at Chelsea possibly.
Mm.
Um, so that's one of Ramsey's great feats and great
Absolutely.
achievements here is that he makes the best out of what he's got, and he sees potential where others had missed it,
Yeah.
and a lot of the players he signed, and did sign a few, came from the reserves at other clubs and went on to win league title winning medals.
Yeah.
That's pretty special.
So if you're talking about the reasons why Ipswich won the league, I'm going to throw in something which seems almost a bit churlish, but I kind of feel like let's get it out of the way, which is a negative reason, if you like, which is the problems of their two main challengers. The sides that finished second and third that season were Burnley and Spurs, who had won the championship in the two previous years.
Yes, they had.
And I don't think it's any coincidence that the FA Cup final in Ipswich's title-winning season was between Burnley and Spurs,
No,
i.e., they're the sides that got to the final. Therefore, they had a heck of a lot of football to play. So, in the case of Spurs, not only did they get to and win the FA Cup final, but they also played in the European Cup and got to the semi-final. Um, and so they were chasing the treble, which just is something we're kind of used to now in modern football. Of course, the big clubs chase doubles and trebles, but it wasn't such a thing back in those days. The squads weren't so big, and so it was a huge demand for a team to compete on three fronts.
I think rotation was frowned on too.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is that a team like, for example, Manchester City in modern football, they would be expected to prioritise the league above the FA Cup. Well, that definitely wasn't the case back in 1962. Winning the FA Cup was arguably the greatest domestic achievement,
Yes,
certainly the most glamorous
yes,
competition, the more
yes,
glamorous competition to win.
yes,
So Spurs had a tremendous challenge on their hands competing on three fronts. Burnley lost the FA Cup final, but they had terrible fixture congestion.
yes,
And I was looking up and between in on March the 10th, they they won their FA Cup quarter final.
mm,
And on April the 30th, they played their last league game. That was a run of 17 matches in 52 days.
yes.
So that's almost exactly a game every
It is.
3 days. And out of those 17 games, they only won four, two of which were FA Cup games. So I think Ipswich, it seems a bit churlish to say, but they did benefit from the fact that their two main rivals had so many games to play. But of course, that begs the question, why was it Ipswich who were able to benefit from that as opposed to
Everton.
Everton or Sheffield Wednesday, etc., the bigger, more established clubs. So of course, Ramsey and his players deserve the most enormous credit that it was them that took advantage of that situation.
Yes, that's true. Although, in fairness, at the beginning of the season, Ramsey does say, by the way, in answer to your last point, I do agree with you. I think the fact that Ipswich had a relatively uh, mellow run in was very helpful to them. For example, and I
Mm,
wonder actually, for example, at one point, Burnley, I think, had four games in hand on Ipswich. There must have been a story
yeah.
here of
Mm,
frozen pitches, mustn't there? And maybe
yeah.
the frozen pitches in the north of England were worse than they were in the benign uh,
Yeah.
southeast, and so there may well
Yeah.
have been more cancellations up north. But you're right. I mean, the mere fact that Ipswich were, for example, well, I think when they first go to the top of the league in March, um, they're 2 points ahead, but they've played four games more, something like that.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so,
So it's a very
for example,
misleading table.
by contrast, Ipswich should come out of the league, out of the League Cup and the FA Cup by the end of January. I think that's right. I think that's right. So
Yeah,
they
league
actually
out of the League Cup in December and FA Cup in January. Yeah.
so it's pretty clear, the sort of field that they've got to plough for the next sort of 3 months, and it is a more measured um, approach to as for Tottenham. I mean, I think I said to you earlier that I think they were just overloaded in March
Yeah.
with too many responsibilities, too many obligations to meet in too many different places, and when they won what so in the semi-final they take on Benfica, semi-final of the European Cup, they take on Benfica. I think they lose away and win at home. I don't think the refereeing was all it might have been.
No,
I
it's
think we
very,
might
very
have
tight. Yeah.
talked about this before. But I mean, I think Tottenham, if they had focused on the domestic titles, they would have had a better chance. But as it was, Alf Ramsey uh, managed to put one over his old friend, inverted commas, Bill Nicholson in the month of March. Because in fact, if Tottenham lose both times to Ipswich in this season,
Yes.
61 to 2, Tottenham lose at home and they lose away. So it's 4 points go to Ipswich, which could and
Mm,
would have gone to Tottenham. Well, if you do the maths, it's quite simple. If
mm,
Tottenham win those games rather than losing them, then they win the league. And by the way, the Charity Shield at the end of the summer of 1962, Tottenham play Ipswich. Tottenham win 5-1. But what I wanted to say about this in relation to the question about a kind of negative way of looking at why Ipswich won was that Ramsey said before the season began, I think this is one of the reasons why Ipswich did so well. Ramsey said before the season began, he told a meeting of the supporters club that he thought that other teams would underestimate Ipswich, and that Ipswich would therefore gain point until other teams caught up with the fact that Ipswich were a pretty good team. Um, then likelihood was that they would Ipswich would pick up points which they wouldn't pick up otherwise if teams were more cautious or sceptical. And
Sure.
I think, I mean, there is some truth in that, but it's not the whole truth. It sounds like
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a nice little illustration, I think, that maybe backs up your point there about this being an underestimated team. It was certainly a team, I think it's fair to say, that was very much greater than some of its parts. And a nice little illustration of that is I had a look at the um, Ipswich player who played at least one league game in the championship winning season and added together the total number of international caps that they won during their careers.
yes,
And the number came to
two.
20.
Oh, okay.
20 in total. However, Peter, 17 of those caps
Yeah.
went to Dermot Curtis,
Ireland.
who was only a squad player.
Yes, yes,
He's a forward, he played 4 games
yes.
and he didn't score a goal. And he accounts for 17 of those 20 caps. So the three that you're thinking of all went to the forward, Crawford.
Crawford gets two, I think.
Well, he actually got
You tried.
three.
Yeah.
He got three
You're
international
right.
caps,
He has.
one of them in the 1950s playing
Yes.
for Malaya against Singapore.
Yeah. So that's a very good quiz
And
question you got there, Carl.
and the other two he got during the championship season, and they're the two that you're thinking of,
He did. And actually, I think that's
for
another reason.
England.
Another reason why I think, I mean, that Ipswich perhaps went well at this, particularly second half of the season, was because they had fewer international call-ups than anybody else. So the
Yes,
players not
well,
only weren't involved in League Cup and FA Cup and European Cup, which they might well have been, but they weren't. They were free of those
yeah,
responsibilities. But they also none of them. I think. Well, Crawford had his two matches for
he
England.
had these two matches, and
Um,
that's it.
didn't go particularly well. Um,
So by way of comparison, if I can, I looked up Spurs the previous season
yeah,
when
yeah,
they
good.
won the double
Yeah,
and did the same thing
very
and
good.
I added up their caps,
Yes,
and that comes to 256.
yes, yes, absolutely. Yes, of course.
So 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 you could say 256 versus 20.
Yeah,
Possibly more realistically, you could
two.
say 256 versus 2.
You could
Yes.
indeed. No,
Yeah.
that's got to be right. Yeah. So,
Uh, so Ipswich didn't win the league because they had the best individual players. They had a team that was much greater than some of the past, but players were underestimated because you made the point about was it, Ellsworthy.
yeah, yep, yep, yep.
Now,
No,
how many Welsh
no,
footballers play 400 league games, a part of a championship winning side where he was virtually ever present. I think he might have played 40 of the
yes,
42
or
games.
41 or something. Yes.
Yeah, and he didn't win a Welsh Cup.
No,
I
it's
mean, to,
astonishing.
to me, that's extraordinary.
Well, I think it bears further investigation because I wonder how many Welsh international players, one, played for a team, were regulars in the team. I mean, Ellsworth was essential to this team. So let's get this right. He's born in Newport. He's a multi-talented sportsman. He could have played rugby. He could have played cricket for Glamorgan. He was offered a contract playing cricket for Glamorgan. Instead, he's with Ipswich for 10, 12 years before this all takes off. And he really is a talent. And so no, I think you're absolutely right. How many Welsh international players? I mean, this is a question for a bit of licking of the pencil.
Hmm.
In over since let's say in between 45 and 1970, won a league title, won a first division title. The answer is vanishingly few. There's
Yeah,
Burgess at Tottenham, Vernon at Everton. They're a very small number.
yeah,
Ellsworth
yeah.
is one of them.
Cliff
Cliff
Jones
Jones and
at Tottenham.
Medwin
Yeah,
and Hopkins at
yeah,
Tottenham.
yeah,
But there's very few. If you look down there's a couple who are on the fringes at Manchester United. Um,
yeah.
but really, how many of them play 40 games in the championship? Virtually none. So
No.
but he put it. He said it was inexplicable that he hadn't been capped, but he said he put it down to the fact that Ipswich is a long way from Wales, and the selectors don't get that far. And so, well,
Yeah.
I find it unbelievable that such a fine player, such an
Yeah.
essential player of the team, of the
I
Ipswich
mean,
team.
the nearest parallel I can think to it, but I don't think it's quite as extreme as Ellsworthy. Is when you look at John McGovern's career.
Yes, 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 yes.
You know,
Well, very good,
yeah, that
very
he
good.
didn't get any caps for
No,
Scotland.
no, no, didn't no.
And in that period of three seasons
Mm.
at Forest, where he lifted as captain a league title, two European Cups, and two League Cups, and yet didn't win a didn't win a cap. Won the league with Derby as well earlier.
I,
Uh, Whereas, I mean, at least that was Scotland. I mean,
yeah,
Wales
and they were
for
very strong.
Ellsworthy not to get a cap is amazing.
I think one way of measuring how talented, naturally talented this team was, I suppose we're making the argument that possibly they weren't quite as naturally talented as to win the league, but they were more naturally talented than had been spotted before Ramsey turned up. One way of looking at that is to ask yourself at the end of this season in which they win the league title, um, the World Cup is going to take place, and
Mm.
all the players who are of the real special quality, and one might expect in league title winners there to be 8 or 9 of special who are going to end up in World Cup squads. How many of this team ended up in the 1962 World Cup squad for England, and as they made their way to wherever it was, Chile? How many of them are in the squad?
Were there any at all?
There were none.
No, that's what I thought. Yeah,
So
yeah,
isn't that interesting? I mean, that's an interesting index of
it
how.
is. But it's interesting as well that it's not very long after this season that, of course, that Ramsey was the England manager
That's
and
right.
he knew the players.
Yes, and he didn't
Ramsey
pick
didn't
them.
pick it.
He
Ramsey
didn't
didn't
pick
pick any of
Crawford.
them.
No, I know. I agree. I think that's very odd.
Yeah. So
He had such trouble finding
maybe,
his centre forward, and he didn't
yeah,
pick Crawford.
yes. So maybe even he shared the opinion that they weren't the best. Although the thing that seems to contradict that a little bit is that during the season, Ipswich had a very good win at home to Manchester United, and after the game, um, Matt Busby said that Ted Phillips must have the most hard and accurate
Yes,
shot in the league.
yes,
And this is a man in Busby who was managing Bobby Charlton.
yes, indeed, indeed, yes. Very interesting.
So Crawford and Phillips bagged loads of goals, didn't they? That season in the league, 33 for Crawford, 28 for Phillips, I
Yes,
think.
absolutely. I mean, that's a
Um,
key
so
reason.
so it is a bit of a mystery why why they weren't being picked. I know Crawford got a couple of caps during the season,
Yes,
especially that Ramsey didn't pick them when he was England
and when he
when
knew how
he
good they
became
were.
England manager.
By the way, one of these squad was in a World Cup squad in 1958. Which one?
Yeah. Now this is the chap that we were talking about, wasn't it? Ellsworthy. The
Correct.
So he was named as part of the Welsh squad, but bizarrely, Wales didn't actually take him. They named him in the squad for the World Cup in Sweden, but left him in the land of his fathers.
I
He
mean, we must
didn't.
imagine that if they had qualified in 62, they must have taken Ellsworthy. Nevertheless, the fact remains that the nearest
Well,
Ellsworthy
I
came
mean,
to
you would
getting a
think
World
so,
Cup.
but they weren't picking him. He didn't play in the home
No, he
internationals. So
didn't. I know. I'd like to know
no,
who was in
so
his position for Wales. Well, I
so so
mean,
maybe not.
no, just extraordinary
It's
work.
really something.
Yes, it is. And one of the things you mentioned there is the goals that went in. And I think I'm right saying that Ipswich scored 100 goals in the course of the season. And they were never short of goals, were they? And that's interesting itself because Phillips and Crawford were obviously Ramsey's chosen front partners. And Ramsey did like two big men up front. I mean, he's saddled with Jimmy Greaves for the 66 World Cup. He didn't really want to play
Yeah,
him. His idea
yeah.
of a striker is somebody who can win the ball in the air. And Hurst
Mm,
and Hunt did the job in 66. Crawford and Phillips did it here. Um, and they scored teeming numbers of goals, 61 of you, as you've said, over the
mm.
course of the league season. Interestingly, when Ipswich get promoted in 60-61, they buy one player to augment the mix. In other words, they get one, you sort of going into the first division, the money's going to be better,
Mm.
crowds are going to be bigger, we're going to have more money to play with. Who are we going to buy? Who's going to be our sort of our reward, our present, our prize for getting up? And who do they pick? Who do they buy?
I
It's
should know
very well. No, I asked the question. That's a rhetorical question. They
that.
they buy that chap there who's over my left hand shoulder, this shoulder here, if I can do that. I know I can't. Moran, Dougie Moran, who they acquire from
Yeah.
Falkirk. Falkirk have got promoted from the Scottish second tier to the Scottish first tier, and as often in these years, the Scots need to sell off to balance the books, sell to English clubs to balance the books. And he buys Moran for 12,000. Moran's got a lot of goals in the Scottish second division, but that's his
Mm.
prize. And I think Moran gets something like 13 goals over the course of the season. So although they are playing with a front three, basically, Ipswich, I mean, Moran is part of the front. Uh, Part of the sort of strike weapon at the front of the team. He doesn't really. I mean, I haven't seen much criticism of him, but he doesn't quite pull his weight in
Yeah.
terms of numbers of goals. Nevertheless,
Mm.
Ipswich are never short of goal. I mean, this is something that happens to clubs who go up from the sort of second tier into the first tier, is they can't score. Ipswich didn't have that problem just for one
Yeah.
moment. They were banging in goals left, right, and centre. And some of their, I mean, if I just have a quick look at well, yeah, yeah. They beat Sheffield United. I mean, these are picking these out. Sheffield United got beaten 4-0. Chelsea got beaten 5-2. West Ham got beaten 4-2. Birmingham got beaten 4-1. Burnley got beaten 6-2. I mean, there are
Mm.
numerous examples of this. And the goals are flying in. That is never the problem. The problem actually is they do concede too many.
Well, I
Um,
think a good illustration of that, it was the second game of the season where they lost 4-3 at Burnley.
Indeed, yes.
And and but I think even though that was a loss,
Mm,
that actually maybe was a very important game
mm,
because Ramsey said, I mean, understandably, 4-3 away to Burnley.
yeah.
He thought that was the best performance to that point that he'd seen his Ipswich side give. And I think that game, albeit a loss, gave them a lot of confidence. And it's a bit strange sometimes that teams in those days would play each other quite close together.
Yeah.
So their second game was a 4-3 loss at Burnley.
Mm,
Their fourth game of the season
mm.
was at home to Burnley. It was their first win, but they won 6-2.
Yes, that's extraordinary. No, it is all. I mean, that resilience to be seen in Ipswich performance at Burnley. So this is the second game. So they draw the first one 0-0 away to Bolton. And of course, if there's some trepidation on Ipswich's part as they approach their new season in the first division, you can understand it because they did fresh out of the third division. A lot of these players, how
Yeah.
they're going to fare, nobody can tell. 0-0 the first game, 4-3 they lose to Burnley in the second, and Burnley take the lead three times, and Ipswich peg them back to each time. So at one
Mm.
stage it's 3-3 against one of the main contenders. So this is a pretty impressive. I think Ramsey says it's one of the best performances they put together because he praises in defeat and he'll only criticise in victory, and that's quite brilliant sort of management, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a
It's
the right way to. But one thing that strikes me about Ipswich, if we look at the broad sweep of the season, that they start actually a little bit tentatively. They lose four of the first 10 league games, for example. Now, by contrast, they only lose one of the last 16. So they really go on a hell of a run after, say, well, from February on. From February on, um, three
That's
games
it. They were unbeaten in February and March, weren't they?
they were.
And then they had a really poor game, the first game in April, when they got absolutely thumped 5-0 by Manchester United at Old Trafford.
That's right.
But that was their last defeat.
It was. It
They
was.
they 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 bounced back from that really poor result.
Well, I think the bouncing back is a really interesting thing you say because I did a calculation of their 10 defeats in the. I mean, in these days you could still win the league after getting beaten
Yeah.
10 times over the. Nowadays you practically got to be unbeaten, but in those days
Yeah.
you could have thought. Well, it was a tighter competition, wasn't it? It was
Yeah.
more competitive.
Much.
You had more people, more rivals after your blood, and Ipswich faced that. But but one thing that I think struck me about Ipswich was their resilience. And one of the reasons I say that is because of the 10 defeats that they suffered in the course of the season, 8 of them are followed by a win. So in other words,
Right.
they don't get on a
Right.
roll here where they haven't won for 5 games or whatever. Time and again, they'll lose a game and they'll win the next one. Here again, they lose to Everton. Or sorry, going back a bit, they lose to Man City, but they win the next one. That's the Burnley game. And time and again this happens. And here's they lose to Wolves, then they win the next 3. They lose to Man City, they win the next 2. They lose to Birmingham, and they win or draw the next, looks like 10. So it's very impressive sort of spirit about the club, which makes
Yeah.
sure that or ensures that they don't get on a roll of defeats, and that they are able to put defeats behind them pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you've nailed it there. The resilience, I think, is a huge part. Ramsey's tactics are a massive part. People didn't know what to do with Ledbetter. I read something about George Coyne playing at right back for Fulham, and obviously Coyne went on to win the World Cup with Ramsey. He said he didn't know what to do with Ledbetter because he didn't know whether to come out to him or not. It's almost a little bit like the withdrawn centre forward,
Yes, I think
except
it is.
Ledbetter was a withdrawn left winger.
Yes, that's right.
Um,
Yes, yes. The winger's
and
job is
but
to get.
I do think it's very interesting as well that, and maybe this is part of it, is it was hard in those days. If you were clever tactically, which Ramsey undoubtedly was a tactical genius, you've not got everything being televised, analysts at every game, etc., etc. If you're clever tactically, it's very hard for the opposition to get wise to you in one season. And other sides didn't get wise to how to counter Ramsey's tactics. Maybe the first side that did, you referred to it earlier, Peter, was Spurs beating them 5-1 in the following season's Charity Shield, where um, Tottenham used their halfback rather than their fullback to counter Ledbetter. And that season, Ipswich, as champions, finished 17th.
Yes, and almost went down. And the next season they did
Yeah.
go down. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, the 60s is not that happy a period for Ipswich. Though at the end of the 60s, they got a Bobby Robson as manager, and they'll fight their way back to the first division then. And then, of course, another golden age actually, but
Absolutely. Yeah.
a bit longer lasting
Yeah.
under Bobby Robson. So thank you, Carl. That's fantastic. It's such an interesting topic, and it's hard to really believe that any team could go from the third tier to the first tier and win it. Oh no, perhaps it isn't. It has been done more recently. And I just wondered, so we got these examples of in front of us of Nottingham Forest, who win the
Yeah.
second division, the first division. Actually, I don't win the second division, but I know they're there to get promoted. The first
Yeah.
division and the European Cup, which I think we can say that is pretty much the equivalent, if not better. And then we've got Leicester, who come through the third. I can't remember if they won the second and win the first too.
So that, yeah, and they won the first division, having owned the previous season, very nearly got relegated on
True.
very, very tight.
Yeah. That's right enough.
It's rare. And of course, there were Spurs under Ramsey.
Yes.
Sorry, not under
Under
Ramsey. With Ramsey in the team,
That's
with
right.
Alf Rowe as manager, who won the second division and then won the first division.
Yes,
So it's rare, yeah.
but it has been
Uh,
done.
but maybe part of the reason why Ipswich did it is Ramsey had the
Yes.
belief it could be done because he'd already done it.
Yes, I'm sure that's absolutely right. And on that note, it's time for us to say goodbye. So thank you very much to Carl and
Thank you,
from me.
Peter.
Thanks, Carl, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Bye.